A ripple in the North American food chain can feel small at first, but every so often, a choice made far from the spotlight reshapes an entire global market. That is exactly what unfolded when officials in Ontario reviewed their beef import standards and set off a reaction no one expected. For years, premium steakhouses across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia counted on American ranches to fill their menus with top-tier cuts. The flow of meat across borders felt steady and unshakable. Buyers trusted the system, contracts rolled on, and the industry moved with a confidence that seemed impossible to challenge. Then Ontario's decision landed, and the effect spread faster than anyone inside the trade could process. More than 150,000 tons of American beef were turned away. And the signal behind that move echoed across continents. Markets that once saw the United States as their automatic first choice started pausing. They began weighing options and studying Canada with a different kind of interest. Back home, ranchers watched inventories climb while shipments slowed, and the familiar rhythm of the industry slipped out of sync. How did this single call reset expectations around the world? What pushed Canada into the spotlight at the moment American producers faltered? Let's dig in. Trouble inside the North American beef supply chain did not begin at the border, and it did not arrive through a dramatic confrontation. It surfaced quietly inside the United States when one of the most influential companies in the industry made a choice that sent a tremor through every part of the ranching world. Tyson Foods announced the closure of its massive facility in Lexington, Nebraska. This plant had been a central pillar of American beef processing for decades. The scale of that operation meant its absence would ripple through ranches, feedlots, transport routes, and international contracts. At nearly the same time, Tyson's facility in Amarillo, Texas, was pushed into operating with a single full-capacity shift. This signaled a deeper problem that no one could ignore. A system built on constant movement suddenly felt unsteady. American agriculture had already been weakened by the long tail of the pandemic era. Ranchers dealt with rising feed prices, tight labor availability, and inconsistent transport schedules. Financial pressure grew heavier each year. Many farms had reduced herd sizes because they could not sustain the costs of maintenance. Others delayed essential upgrades or slaughter dates to avoid falling deeper into debt. The industry was functioning, but it moved with difficulty. It was like a machine that had lost its lubrication and was grinding forward because it had no other option. By the time Tyson began scaling back, the entire landscape was vulnerable and running near its limits. The structural cracks were wide, and everyone inside the industry could see them. Then Ontario made a decision that exposed the depth of this vulnerability. Officials refused a volume of American beef significant enough to force every major buyer and government analyst to look twice. It was not a postponement. It was not a customs inspection delay. It was a direct rejection. Ontario framed the refusal as a response to Washington's trade posture, which Canada viewed as unfair and hostile. The message was delivered through economic pressure rather than political speeches, and it carried far more weight because it struck at a moment when the United States could not absorb new problems. What followed was not a simple dispute between two neighbors. Ontario's action acted as a catalyst for something much larger because it revealed a shift that had been slowly building underneath the surface. Once Canada stepped forward, foreign markets began rethinking their own relationships with the United States. For many years, American beef held a position that felt immovable. Buyers across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East relied on American supply chains for consistency, quantity, and quality. Even regions with strong local cattle industries still leaned on American imports to meet demand. That dominance was rooted in confidence. Buyers believed American ranchers would deliver on time, maintain standards, and provide reliable pricing structures. However, confidence fades when instability becomes visible, and the last few years chipped away at the foundation of American agricultural trust. Costs rose rapidly, shipping became unpredictable, quality concerns emerged in several markets, trade tensions escalated without warning. Many foreign buyers tolerated these issues because the United States remained the largest and most convenient source. They assumed the turbulence would calm and the old reliability would return. Ontario's rejection changed the scope of that patience. The decision was public. It was forceful. It encouraged buyers to reconsider whether sticking with the United States was truly the safest long-term choice. And once that thought entered the conversation, the perception of American dominance cracked. Japan was the first major buyer to pull back. The country did not announce a sweeping ban, but it adjusted its import plans and reduced upcoming orders. The significance of that move could not be overstated. Japanese demand for premium beef shaped entire segments of the American ranching economy. Losing part of that market meant losing leverage for future deals. Germany then began reviewing long-standing contracts. European distributors hinted that they were preparing for alternative sourcing. The UAE, a market known for its appetite for high-quality imported meat, started exploring new suppliers without hesitation. These decisions did not emerge from nowhere. Behind the scenes, many buyers had already been uneasy about the volatility surrounding American trade policies. Tariff disputes, rapid regulatory shifts, and inconsistent export strategies had created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Canada's choice did not create doubt. It revealed the doubt that had been accumulating for years. As foreign buyers re-evaluated their positions, American export terminals began to stall. Containers sat longer than usual, cold storage filled without relief. Shipments were delayed because ports could not clear inventory fast enough. Ranchers who had already been struggling now saw their cattle flooding a market that no longer had enough buyers waiting on the other side. Costs rose while revenue fell. Many producers scaled back breeding plans or reduced herd sizes even further because they could not risk being stuck with animals they could not move. The global market was not simply abandoning the United States. Buyers were spreading their risk. They were expanding their networks and positioning themselves for a future where reliability mattered more than production power. In the middle of this recalibration, Canada stepped into the spotlight. It was an opportunity they had not expected but had spent years preparing for. Canadian beef producers suddenly found themselves receiving inquiries from buyers who had never considered them as primary partners before. These buyers asked about long-term contracts, pricing structures, and guarantees of consistent supply. Canada had exported beef for years, but it had never been seen as the central player in global markets. Now, the narrative shifted. The maple leaf label began to represent stability during a period when stability was scarce. Canada earned this moment through years of deliberate preparation. The country invested heavily in agricultural modernization and stringent quality control programs designed to reassure international partners. These initiatives were not aimed at outshining American producers, but at raising Canada's global credibility. Transparent audits, clean safety records, and consistent production standards built a trustworthy reputation. This appealed to countries with strict import regulations. Diplomatic strategy played an essential role as well. Canadian officials focused on building dependable relationships with Asian, European, and Middle Eastern markets. They emphasized predictable trade behavior, long-term cooperation, and mutual benefit. When global markets hesitated to bet on the United States, the clarity of Canada's approach stood out. Nations like Japan and South Korea valued steady, dependable supply chains. They found Canada's practices comforting. The UAE respected Canada's clean production standards. Germany appreciated Canada's regulatory transparency. With new interest flooding in, Canadian processors expanded operations. They negotiated agreements that would have been unimaginable a few years earlier. The country's rise did not feel like a sudden jump. It felt like the activation of a strategy that had been quietly building for years. It was waiting for the moment when the world would search for an alternative. Analysts now believe that Canada may have been preparing for an opportunity of this magnitude far longer than most realized. When trade conflicts affected the American industry, Canada emphasized diplomacy. When American ranchers struggled with financial volatility, Canada kept prices consistent. When global confidence in the United States weakened, Canada preserved its stability. This consistency positioned Canada as a safe harbor at precisely the moment when buyers needed one. As more countries shifted their contracts northward, the impact spread into restaurants, processing companies, and retail chains across the world. Menus were rewritten to reflect new sourcing options. Food processors secured supply agreements that favored Canadian producers. Retail buyers adjusted their long-term planning to accommodate Canada's predictable output. In regions where American delays once caused price fluctuations, Canadian shipments brought a level of stability that benefited entire markets. Economists warned the United States that this shift was not likely to fade quickly. In global food markets, trust is the most valuable currency. Once that trust weakens, recovery becomes slow and difficult. Many buyers saw the American system as unpredictable, and unpredictability is a risk they could not afford. Instead of waiting for conditions to improve, they acted. American ranchers continue to feel the squeeze. High costs and shrinking demand created an environment where many struggled to break even. Feed prices remained elevated. Transportation remained inconsistent. Debt loads grew heavier. Some producers questioned their ability to stay in the business long term. Others paused future investments because they could not predict whether recovery would come soon enough to justify the risk. Global discussions increasingly shifted to one central question. Was this disruption a temporary reaction to American trade policies, or was it the beginning of a long-term shift in the global beef market? The optimistic interpretation suggested that the United States possessed enough production scale to recover. It assumed that once political tensions eased, established relationships would return. Public statements from American officials reinforced this message. They implied that the market would correct itself with time and stability. Privately, many analysts expressed doubt. Their concern was not about the capacity of American ranchers, it was about the perception of American reliability. For years, international buyers had witnessed policy swings, export restrictions, and plant closures. They saw labor shortages, fuel spikes, and transportation delays. Each disruption created uncertainty. Each uncertainty weakened trust. Canada's advantage came from its steadiness. While the United States navigated unpredictable political climates, Canada maintained consistent rules. They offered clear pricing frameworks and a diplomatic approach to foreign relations. When Ontario rejected American beef, buyers did not respond as if Canada were a temporary substitute. They viewed Canada as a partner capable of providing stability during a period when stability mattered more than anything else. Once international buyers signed multi-year deals with Canadian suppliers, reversing those deals would require significant disruption. Restaurants and retailers could not afford more volatility. Food chains rely on consistency, and Canada offered it at a time when the United States struggled to provide it. The long-term shift became more evident as months passed. Buyers continued reinforcing their partnerships with Canada. Some analysts now argue that the United States may reclaim part of its market share in the future, but rebuilding trust will take time. Others believe the shift is structural. They argue that Canada's new position in the global market may remain firmly in place. The transformation of the North American beef industry became one of the clearest examples of how global markets react to uncertainty. What began as a quiet decision in Ontario revealed a fundamental imbalance within the American system. It demonstrated how fast global confidence can move when it finds a more reliable path. For a long time, American dominance seemed untouchable. Buyers around the world depended on American ranchers and had no reason to look elsewhere. But when instability became visible, the market responded. Buyers searched for a partner that could provide security, and they found it further north. Canada did not overpower the United States with scale or aggression. Canada succeeded by maintaining a steady posture while its neighbor struggled. Reliability is a form of strength that can outweigh size. And in global food markets, reliability shapes the direction of entire industries. The world now watches the United States as it attempts to regain stability. It also watches Canada as it expands and strengthens relationships that once would have belonged to its southern neighbor. The outcome of this transition will shape the future of North American agriculture for years to come. What are your thoughts on all this? Do you think the US can regain its footing, or has the market shifted for good? Share them in the comments below. Before you leave, subscribe for more and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our uploads. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.